Once again, if you guys like the content we're providing, be sure to subscribe today to the channel so you don't miss any of the upcoming action. We have just wrapped up Carb Day, the final day of practice for the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500. We have race day to look forward to in just under 48 hours, and then we have the summer stretch of the NHRA Tour to look forward to, all brought to you by friends at Peak Performance. So you want to stay up to date with everything going on in the motorsports world, then be sure to subscribe today so you don't miss any of the uploads. And without further ado, let's get into the video. The final day of practice for the 109th running of the Indianapolis 500 has wrapped up today, and much like everything that has to do with this month of May, it was anything but usual. We had shades of 2017 as we had multiple issues with the engines plaguing today's 2-hour session. Take us through the highlights of what happened here this afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the worst thing that you could ever have happen is having a issue on the final day of preparation for the Indy 500. And once again, we saw it rear its ugly head, especially in this little block right here. We had 2 engine failures from that side of the garage, and then we had a fuel fire that made its way into the cockpit on this side of the garage with the number 23 entry of Ryan Hunter-Reay. A little bit of a scary situation. He noticed that there was a very cold liquid leaking into the cockpit of the car as he was leaving pit lane, and noticed it was fuel. So he went as quickly as he could around the track to keep it from getting into the cockpit, came to a stop in pit lane where the car was engulfed in flames, and it looks like it's going to be a long night ahead for the Dreyer and Reinbold crew as they look to rebuild that car before race day. Now, as for the other 2 entries on the other side of the garage, the number 15 entry of Graham Rahal, in about the 1 hour mark of today's final practice session, started having smoke trailing from the car. He did make it back to the pit lane, but it will be a engine change before we get to race day. And then almost same thing for Takuma Sato. His happened within the last 15 minutes. We first noticed some smoke coming out of turn number 2, and his car ground to a halt on the back straightaway. They just got the car back and are starting to really dive into it. And so for 2 of the 4 Rahal entries, it is engine changes before race day. So the first time that those cars will be in song, will be on the grid.
You know, that's a big story to follow because obviously with Graham Rahal and Ryan Hunter-Reay, they're starting deep in the field. There weren't going to be much factors for the race win, as to say, on Sunday. But Takuma Sato is starting in the middle of row number 1, and he was, in a lot of people's eyes, the front runner to win this 500 with how good that car is. And he's the only car out of the entire Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan stable that really had a shot at winning this 500. How much of a shakeup is this going to be for that team, considering back at the open test, they wrote off the chassis that he just had, and now they just wrote off the engine that he's been using all month long.
Yeah, it's going to be definitely a big disadvantage for them going into the race, because obviously the last thing you want to do is shake down a brand new engine on Sunday morning. You know, normally we have install laps here for practice in the mornings, and you have time to go back and check things. I mean, anything could happen, because even with the Ed Carpenter group, they had a couple of minor leaks on 2 of their cars today. You know, at least it happened today and not on race day, but all this is going to be an unknown going into Sunday. And almost as a precautionary measure, they pulled out the 30 and 45 entries from their garage and did another warm-up cycle on them, probably so the Honda engineers could look through the telemetry and see if there's anything wrong with those power plants. You know, this is not the first time we've seen this, especially with Honda. We saw this in 2017, as you mentioned before. We saw this last year where a batch of Honda engines went bad, not only in the run-up to the race, but in the race itself. And it looks like if we go back to the Grand Prix, it seems to be exclusively a Honda issue. And one last note on this real quick. Remember, it was Honda that instructed their teams to change engines before qualifying instead of the traditional after qualifying. So that's going into race day, that's a little bit shaky ground.
And as for the other 30 cars, you know, we did have about almost, I'd say, an hour and a half of green flag running after all the cautions came out. One of the things we're starting to notice with this hybrid system, with this new aero, you noticed a lot more downforce with the wickers being added onto these cars, and we can see it in turn number 1 as the cars are drifting a lot higher at the exit of turn number 1 than we've seen in years past. We thought at the beginning of the session, it looked like Elio Castroneves was trying to build a second lane in turn number 1 with how high he was running, but it seems to be just the entire field having that problem.
Yeah, so one thing that definitely coming in and walking through the garage area today, you know, one thing you look for, especially on Carb Day, is a lot of the teams are practicing for race running. So they're going to be running the amounts of downforce they intend to run on the race. And we've seen, you know, extensions, wickers on extensions. mainly down to the fact that come Sunday, it's going to be in the mid-60s and cloudy throughout the race, which is ideal conditions, especially for turbocharged cars, like we saw in 2013. It's going to be a fast race. The air is going to be dense. It's going to be a very aero-reliant race. And the bravery of the moves you make is going to be based on that downforce. And then you throw in the factor of the hybrid system as well, and the fact that you have that little bit of boost going down the back straightaway where someone else may not have. There's a lot of questions in this 500, being the first one with the hybrid system, of who regens where and who is able to make passes going on down the back straightaway, and how much of a factor will that have going into the lap 200.
And one of the things we talked about as well, with that cool air you talked about, back to that 2013 race, when you have cooler air like this, it gives the engines a lot more air to work with and a lot more to eat up to give us those high speeds. And with that, and a lot more passing opportunities, cars were able to find more pace out of these engines. And drivers that we saw making those moves, the likes of Takuma Sato, that's why he's one of the front runners with the passes he was able to make. Santino Ferrucci, who was still struggling with the handling of his race car, when he is able to make the passes, is slingshotting around him. But of course, the one driver that we're all looking at right now is Joseph Newgarden, top of the speed charts to end the final practice session of the month of May. And even though he's starting at the back of the field, he is still, without a doubt, one of the strongest cars in the field. And if it wasn't for that last row spot, he would easily be the runaway favorite to win this race.
Yeah, and one thing that I was very curious about was how those Team Penske cars were able to kind of cope with heavy traffic situations. So, and what we saw a lot, especially out of Power and Newgarden, was they sent those cars out and tacked them onto the back of the train, and then they just sliced and diced their way through. And eventually they'd find their way to the front, and as soon as they did, they would come in after running a couple laps at the front and then reset and go to the back of the field and do it all over again. So the Penske cars overall look very, very strong in traffic.
We'll talk about our picks for the 500 later on in the video. But first, let's go through the final practice session results of the month of May, brought to you by our friends over at Peak Performance.
Protect your vehicle with Peak Original Equipment Technology. Our formulas match the vehicle manufacturer's technology requirements so that we have the perfect match for every vehicle.
And after the final practice session, as we mentioned, it's Joseph Newgarden and his number 2 Shell Pennzoil Chevrolet on top of the board, with Takuma Sato with his aforementioned issues late in the running, lining up in second. In third, the number 9 Chip Ganassi Racing entry from Scott Dixon. Fourth, the sister Rahal Letterman entry of Devlin DiFrancesco. And fifth, Will Power. In sixth position, we have the number 60 entry of Felix Rosenquist. Really strong showing from the Meyer Shank Racing team. And right behind him, Helio Castroneves, who has constantly said that his car in race trim is one to contend with. In eighth position, probably one of the favorites going into race day, Pato O'Ward. Ninth, the AJ Foyt Racing entry of David Malukas. And rounding out your top 10, the number 76 Juncos Hollinger entry of Connor Daly.
And if you hear the cheering in the back, that's because they just finished up the Wiener 500. And for anybody who cares, the Slaw Dog had a last-minute pass around the Shy Dog entry to win in at the final stretch of the race. So yeah, crowd was really into that. I'll give them that.
Every lap.
Yeah, I mean, they're going ballistic in the grandstands, and that's something I want to also point out as well. Every year it seems like this day just gets crazier and crazier in the fan turnout. For the second year in a row, I think, Tunnel 6, which is the tunnel right by the pagoda, again, had to shut it down because the fans took it over. I had to go all the way around by the merchandise trailers just to get in here because I couldn't even see the ground from the top of the media center. So it's shoulder to shoulder everywhere you go, and the grandstand is just packed, and they're lively days. Again, one of the craziest days of the month. And with the sold-out grandstands coming into Sunday afternoon, oh God, this is gonna get nuts.
Get here early.
Get here early. I made that mistake today. To finish off this video, of course, the big question in everybody's mind: who is going to win the Indianapolis 500? That is the number one question going into Sunday. Who are the front runners? Who are the people we're going to be looking out for? So we're going to do something like we did last year. We're going to go 3 favorites and an underdog. So we're going to go through our top 3 and then who we think is going to be the dark horse pick. First off, for me, I'm going to go with the easy one, Alex Palou. He's won 4 out of the first 5 races of the season. He's starting within the first 2 rows. He's been strong here in the past. statistics say, with how good this car has been all month long, with how good this car has been all season long, there's no doubt that you cannot put Alex Palou towards the top of that list.
Yeah, and for my first pick, I'm actually going to kind of go with another obvious one with Pato O'Ward. You know, this place picks and chooses its winners, and it's definitely given Pato a ton of heartbreak. I don't think I've ever seen him as dejected after last year's race. He's come close so many times. He's learned the mistakes. So if it comes down to a last lap battle again, I think he's going to have enough experience of what not to do to be able to pull off the right move and bring it home.
And Pato O'Ward's going to be my second pick as well because of the fact, like you said, with how good he's been within the last few years. Last year, he did not have the best car on the grid, but he was still fighting for the lead heading into the final 2 turns of last year's 500. And we know what he's learned from that. Again, multiple people have talked about he's lost this race every single way you could, from crashing to last lap passes to just not being a factor all race. It's really becoming like the same with Alex Palou. It's not a matter of if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen, because you just know that car has what it takes to win it. And without a doubt, if everything goes right with Pato O'Ward and he can stay out front and it can actually not lose momentum on the backstretch, without a doubt, he's going to be one of the runaway favorites for this race.
And for my second pick, I'm going to go Felix Rosenquist. The Meyer-Shank team historically has been very strong here, whether it be on the road course configuration or the oval configuration. They have an Indy 500 win under their seatbelt with Helio Castroneves now leading that team. And also, we kind of all forget this, but they also have engineering help from Chip Ganassi Racing. There is a very strong technical alliance there. And talking with some of the Meyer-Shank crew members, they said it feels more like a partnership than a B team situation like they felt like they've had in the past. And if they could win an Indy 500 as a B team, then if they're in a technical alliance where everything's 50-50 with Chip Ganassi Racing, they're the best bet. And let's face it, Felix Rosenquist, he's really good here, and he can find pace.
And I believe they mentioned this is his 7th race here this year, and if I'm correct, he's led about, I believe in the 6 starts he's had, he's led 4 of them. He's led all but 2 starts. Speaking of Ganassi, I'm going to go with the obvious one as well, that being Scott Dixon. I know that seems like an obvious choice. I know he's been quiet all month long, but that's the thing about Scott Dixon. You cannot count this guy out, especially at this racetrack. They mentioned it during on the PA system during practice. In the 200 laps of the 500, he's led every single lap except 2. I believe it's at least within the late 150s, both of them. He has come so close. Again, you want to talk about a guy who has lost this race every single way you can. Of course, he's won the race. He's 2008 champion of this event. But it's become the question of if that second win's ever going to come. He has been so dominant here in the past. He's been quiet. He's been the front runner. He's been at the front and the back. Again, last year, he wasn't much of a factor in anyone's eyes, but he ended up finishing 3rd in this race just by being where he needed to be at the right times. And he's, I believe, the top 5. He gave me a look. That wasn't exactly 3rd. I believe it was actually 4th. But regardless of the fact, no matter where you look at this guy, he's always one of the front runners. And when you have situations like a curveball thrown in, like a hybrid system, he usually finds ways to shine in those moments. And I believe that's one of the things that could really help him get over the line to possibly secure that second 500. And again, with the cold weather, he's one of the most veteran drivers in the series. If anyone's going to know how to maneuver the challenging conditions of high winds, cloud cover, and cold temperatures, it's going to be the Iceman.
So for my third pick, I'm actually going to go a little bit outside the box here. I'm going to go Santino Ferrucci. So with Santino, we know he's good here. We know it. He proves it year after year. And even when he has a terrible race car, he's still good here. And, you know, we saw him shine 2 years ago, getting a podium. And we saw him have a relatively decent year last year up in the fight towards the end of the race. And here's the thing. He's been complaining about his car all month long. He's been complaining that he's not comfortable. But some of the moves that he's pulling in traffic is what some of these guys in this garage area wouldn't pull when they are comfortable in their car. So Santino Ferrucci, good car, bad car, indifferent, is still a threat. So look out for him.
As for my dark horse, this seems like a crazy thing to call a dark horse, but with the situation that he's in, it really is. But regardless of the fact, no matter what happens, you really can't count him out, and that is the number 2 car, Joseph Newgarden. He is in the position to make history this year, being the first driver to win 3 500s in a row. The last person that had that shot was fellow Penske veteran Helio Castroneves, and I believe before that, Bill Yukovich in '55, which was about 70 years ago, if math is correct for me. you cannot count this guy out. He also has the chance of making history by being the guy to win the race from the furthest back in the field on the last row, starting in the middle. It's going to be really hard for him. But again, we saw him out in the field. He's able to cut his way through traffic. Penske knows how to get these things done. They've been in these positions before. They know how to maneuver through the field and get the strategy right. That's what helped them win the 500 the past 2 years. So if you get these perfectly timed cautions, if you have the things go right for them, if the pit crew is able to be perfect like they always have been at this racetrack the last 2 years, he can easily make his way through this field. And if you have a 20 to go restart and he's in the top 5, you better hang on, because he's going to be making moves, because he has a chip on his shoulder to want to win this 500 after everything that's happened within the last 720 days.
Yeah, for sure. Now my dark horse, I'm gonna keep it within the team here. I'm gonna go David Malukas as the dark horse. You know, if you look at some of the moves that Malukas has put on, like you can tell by the way he drives. He's very comfortable and confident in his car. You know, we talked about it on Saturday during qualifying. He went out there and bumped his way up in the Fast 12 when he was already in it. You know, that car has pace. The driver certainly has the talent, you know, and we've only seen him here previously in Dale Coyne cars with the HMDs, and he still was phenomenal with those, with the technology that was given to him. And when you talk about the Penske alignment, it's the same thing with Santino Ferrucci. I think it's going to pay dividends for David Malukas. He's definitely an up-and-coming talent. We've seen what he can do on ovals, especially at Gateway. Now he has the technology. He has the talent. He has everything he needs to pull off a win, and he just looks good.
And with that, those are our picks for the High and 500. Be sure to give us your picks down below for who you think is going to be the man who gets his face on the Borg-Warner Trophy for the 2025 Indianapolis 500. Thank you guys so much for watching all month long. This has been an incredible month, and we still have the race to look forward to. We have the rest of Carb Day to get through, and then we get one more day off, and then it's showtime for the 109th edition of the greatest spectacle in racing. Thank you again to our friends at Peak Performance for sponsoring us all month long. Link down in the description to join the Peak Squad email list. I highly recommend you do it. They have a lot of good behind the scenes content. They did a lot of promotional work out of Chicago for the NHRA Route 66 Nationals with driver sightings with both their own in-house grown talent, Alex Taylor, but of course the JFR cars of John Force and Jack Beckman, and they're going to keep doing it all month long. So if you want all the behind the scenes content that goes on within the NHRA side, as well as some of the street car side, be sure to join the emailing list down below. It'll be right down there, the first link in the description. Kevin, final thoughts before we wrap this up and look forward to race day?
Well, I think this is going to be a 500 to remember. The conditions are right for a great race. We have a very jumbled up field going into race day. You know, we have some cars that deserve to be at the front that aren't, and we have some cars that we wouldn't have expected to be at the front that are. So it's going to be definitely one to remember. I mean, with last year's race, we remember the sunset finish. I think this one's going to be definitely a race.
And with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe down below. Be sure to like the video and comment who you think is going to win this year's 500. Be sure to follow us on all social media pages down below. And my name is Matt Gother on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Thank you once again. A special thank you to our friends at Peak Performance who are sponsoring us for the month of May, as well as throughout the rest of the summer and fall season for the NHRA. And until race day for the 109th edition of the Indianapolis 500, this was my Mac. We will see you next time.